Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Pandora, as well as the latest episode of The 100. Like always, I'm going to talk about something that you want to listen to. You can always look in the description down below. I include a timer so I talk about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about the series premiere of Pandora, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The 100. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the series premiere of Pandora. A very interesting series premiere, obviously like a lot of setup, and even then it's like we get a lot of questions asked in this, but obviously not really getting any answers probably until we progress further in the story. But first of all, we get introduced to a lot of our main characters. First and foremost, Jacqueline, whose parents were killed. She's from New Portland. In particular, it's this colony on a different planet, which I guess like not everyone who's human is on Earth. I guess it's just kind of like humans have kind of expanded, space. But we really, like I said, from what I was reading, this series takes place in the year 2199, I think. So and I never thought of the parallels before, but it kind of like if you're familiar with the video game Star Ocean. Well, the Star Ocean series, it's a JRPG series. It kind of seems like it's kind of in that similar vein of just like humans just went out in space interacting with other species across the galaxy type of situation. So it seems like it's kind of definitely got that vibe. Kind of, because I initially kind of was like, oh, it must have like kind of the 100 vibe, but it seems like it more so kind of aligns with Star Ocean. But nevertheless, that's a tangent all on its own. But Jack's parents were killed in the colony. It's interesting because she just happens to not be there when it happened. So was that purely a coincidence? Were the moment waiting? Or was, because the whole thing is like, well, why did it happen? Like, I'm starting to think maybe it wasn't just about destroying that colony. It was about destroying her. And if we have to kill other people along the way, who cares as long as we take care of Jax, potentially. So basically, she's being assigned to this fleet academy where her uncle Osborne is. Well, Donovan, but we'll just refer to him as Osborne, which is interesting. Nevertheless, I won't go down that route. The thing is, she hasn't really been in contact with her uncle. This is literally the first time they're really meeting, which is like, why have you gone your entire life not meeting or knowing him? That's interesting. Obviously, like, she kind of hits it off bad with one of her professors. To be fair, he was kind of an asshole for it, but I guess it's the whole thing of like, yeah, he knows her situation, but he's not trying to treat her any differently. So, I mean, that's cool because, it's like if you try to give her special treatment, it just seemed like you're catering to her just because of, but it doesn't mean he has to kind of be a dick. Sure, like the whole, like, but you can understand where he's coming from because it's like the whole thing of like, the fact is if you kind of misunderstand like, kind of like the culture of another like species or whatever, and you kind of do something that might kind of offend them or something, like your actions could have consequences because you just showing up late kind of offend them. Or be wary of, because essentially it kind of seems like that class in particular, I don't remember we ever got the titling for the class, but it's more so like kind of like, oh, we actually did, but I don't remember what it's necessarily called. It seems like it's kind of how you interact with other species, like upon first contact type of situation, how to handle those particular things, because like they are, like I said, being set up to be like essentially almost kind of like a Starfleet, essentially. I guess that's the actually exact word. So like I said, I'm sure there's parallels between this and Star Trek. I'm not a big Star Trek fan. I've seen bits and pieces of Star Trek. That's about it. So once again, kind of leaning more towards the Star Ocean theme. Nevertheless, especially earlier days, which technically involves Star Ocean 4, even though it's the fourth one, it goes earlier days in the whole thing. It's a whole thing, like I said, tangent. Introduce other characters. One is Greg. Interesting enough, I kept looking, I was like, why do I recognize that actor? His name's John Kim, and what I recognize him from is The Librarians, the TV show, which I need to circle back to that. Like, I watched all of season 1 and really liked it. I just fell behind and just never caught up with the show, so at some point I need to take time to just catch it. But I kept looking, I was like, why do I recognize you? And that's why. So there's him, which it seems like obviously there's something, him and Jack's kind of immediately hit it off. There's Thomas, who turns out he's part telepath, because apparently it's something he got from his dad, but his dad got arrested because he was cheating in like a casino type of thing, but it seems like it wasn't like the first time. So I'm curious to kind of like, it's little small things like that. I'm very curious to see like, okay, what does that turn out to be? Like, you're gonna have like a kind of a criminal in your family, so it's like, is that why he's striving kind of to be the best? Is to kind of make up for the fact it's maybe potential shame that his father brought upon his family? I don't know. It doesn't seem like he has the best relationship with his dad. Just kind of like a almost kind of annoyed tone that he had when he was talking about his dad. Then there's Atreya, who seems like she kind of, says what's on her mind. Because, like, she brings up, because everyone's like, oh, yeah, I'm sure there's more to your story, Jax. And they're like, she's like, of course, her parents got killed. Didn't you hear about it? And Thomas is like, yeah, we heard about it. Just because it's on my mind doesn't mean it's on my tongue. And she kind of says what's on her mind without really kind of thinking things through. Turns out, apparently, she's a clone, which is interesting because it's like, not only was she kind of like, to the Adari, she was kind of like, her and other clones are kind of slaves, and so it's like, apparently they don't want their, clones to get educated. It makes sense because it's like, no, we need you ignorant and dumb so that you're easier to control. But it's like, so how do you get your, because even like, Raylan, which I'll get to soon enough, was like, oh, how'd you get your emancipation? She was like, I killed my master. I'm like, she said that shit so nonchalantly, it made things a little awkward, but it's like, I was thinking like, oh, I was like, oh, that's your attempt at a joke. It's like, no, she was straight up serious. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And they just let you come to this school and everything. But I guess like, maybe that differentiates her between many different clones, because the fact is that she's kind of got her free will of her own, that she's kind of become her own person rather than just being essentially, as she kind of refers to it, like a slave, kind of like a tool that just kind of be, used, and so then we get to Raylan as Atarian. Apparently there's been bad blood. Literally, we're coming off the cusp of a war with them, and it's like, oh, you're attending a school, why? And it's like, oh, jokingly, he was like, oh yeah, like, I'm here for my to spy on you guys. He's like, that was my attempt at a joke. Things later on in the episode make it seem like, no, that wasn't a joke. That was him actually being serious, but he was a little too damn honest, so he had to kind of spin it off as a joke. Maybe that was how he was going to get them to let their guard down, because they're like, oh, like, because everyone's got their preconceived notions of Zentarians of just being like, I mean, even Jax's, what would you call her, roommate? Seems like she might be a robot or something. I don't know, because it's like, oh, you're rebooting. She's like, no, I don't like it when you call it that. It's meditating. So it's like, oh, I'm a far superior being. That's not me being narcissistic. That's just a fact. So it seems like she might be like some kind of AI type of situation. Maybe. We'll see. Because she seems like she has our preconceived notions of Zentarians. But obviously, like, Jax is trying to be open-minded, because it's like, hey, she's got a new band of friends, so I'm interested to kind of dive in and kind of learn. Like I said, we got little steps towards everyone, because even Raylan, his dad is the Zentarian, like, what was it, ambassador, so he's pretty high up. I mean, which isn't to say like he's like the top doll, but he's essentially the voice that the Zentarian probably government or hierarchy speaks through him. So he's not top rank, but he's upper echelon in the rankings and stuff like that. Which I'm sure is kind of going to put a lot of pressure on Raylan, because Raylan probably doesn't have much of a choice. It's like, yeah, I don't want to do that thing of just kind of, I don't know. Maybe he initially took up the assignment being like, oh, my dad wants this of me, okay, I'll do it. But at the same time, maybe he's like, no, this is for the Zentarian people. The fact of the matter is humans are terrible, blah, blah, blah. But then, like, he actually was like, honestly, humans talk about, being peaceful and all this stuff. But he basically says that humans have a tendency to kind of say these pretty words and just be very poetic stuff, but they never really kind of stand by their words. But he says, like, when being around Jax and this group of people kind of changed their mind to be like, yeah, humans are kind of okay. So it's going to be interesting to see that parallel, what that means going forward. We'll see. Especially because it seems like potentially him and Greg might have a thing. Like, Greg definitely likes Jax, but it also seems like Raylan might, but it might just be that Raylan's kind of, like, protective, being like, oh, like, what are your intentions, type of situation. They even reference that planet Euphoria, and it's like, yeah, should have been destroyed during the war, which is like, okay. The fact is, it's called Euphoria. Part of me is like, it's probably like a, for lack of a better term, probably like a drug, sex, fuel type of planet or something like that, or a resort, or whatever it is. That's my assumption, just because of titling Euphoria, just because that, euphoric feeling and stuff like that. That's what I'm assuming. And the fact is that he was like, it should have been destroyed, made me think like it isn't like the most, I don't know. Like I said, we'll see. We obviously also learned that her uncle is obviously hiding stuff from her. A lot of people know, in particular, like Ellison is a teacher who knows. There's also Xander, you know, his TA, but he can't do anything about it. Like he's like, Jax deserves to know the truth. It's like, yeah, you can feel that way, but you still have to follow my orders. So that's what part of me is like, oh, you're following orders. It's like, is he supposed to be a clone? But it's like, no, I guess he's just a soldier in this grand scheme of things. I mean, he seems to be an agent, kind of an undercover agent, as we kind of find out later on. But that in itself is very interesting, because he lies to her and tells her that the investigation into her parents' death, because it's been 3 months, a whole colony being attacked and destroyed. It's like, what's up with that? But no one's giving her any answers. And he's saying that the investigation has been closed now, and he doesn't know why, but it's a cover for whatever's really going on. A lot of interesting things. Like, obviously, Greg, Raylan, and her go to check things out. I do like that Thomas and Atreya had her back. I love the whole scene of being like, trying to keep that dude distracted, the cake and everything, kissing him on the cheek. And then Thomas is like, what's going on here? And he's like, it's his birthday? It's your birthday? He's like, well, not really. Then why are you kissing my girlfriend? But I did like that conversation between him and Thomas and Atreya, because for her, it's like, because he's like, what are we doing? We help her out doing this. We could get expelled. But for, you know, her, it's like, as a clone, like, she was kind of a slave to Adari. So it's like her sister said a line to her, be a voice, not an echo. Which that must be a real phrase. Like, kind of like the whole, like I've talked about recently, like the whole two wolves inside of you at war type of situation. Because I've heard that line, be a voice, not an echo. Like, that must be a reference to something. Like, because I've heard that in the chorus of a song. It's a whole thing. Actually, it's a really catchy song now. Like, I won't get into it once again, another tangent. But I'd like to hear it now again. I'm like, oh, I thought that was just kind of a line from the song. But it's like, no, that must be a well-known phrase or something. To be a voice, not an echo. It makes kind of like essentially be your own person, not, you know, regurgitate what other people say. Like, don't be kind of like essentially a mouth puppet put other people. Like, voice your own opinions, stand by your own words and stand in actions, be your own person, essentially. Which obviously that holds a lot of weight for her. That's kind of what she's doing now, being emancipated, being her own person, you know. So, which obviously Greg also, because like Jax had been like, are they a couple? And he's like, and Greg was like, not yet, because Thomas has a girlfriend, but she's like a far away or something like that. So it's like a, you know, long distance relationships, ones that are like trillions of light years apart, tend to not work out. So you know, it almost seems like it's kind of like that's kind of only a matter of time type of situation. So, but returning to find out what's going on the, you know, planet, what happened with the whole New Portland situation. It's the whole situation of like, Xander's there, but he won't give her any answers, and she goes to investigate. Apparently there was some discoveries that could be dangerous to the entire galaxy. He's like, I can't get into specifics. And then there's like a portal that opens that Jax and Xander go through. They come out, there's creatures attacking them. Luckily, they were taken care of. Quite a few people potentially died. But it turns out these creatures are similar to humans in certain regard. You know, certain parts of them are kind of similar to a lot of terrestrials, but like there's certain things in their DNA that's close to Homo sapiens. But then it also turns out that it's also close to Jax. So Jax is kind of close to these creatures. So showing that Jax isn't 100% human, even though she looks the way she does. And actually, we also found out that well, before I even get to that, Osborn is actually the reason why her parents were there in the first place, studying everything. He actually put them in that position. Osborn even refers to Jax as Pandora, which I read little bits about what the show was about, that she is special, but I didn't realize that Pandora was really referencing her. I'm like, oh, like Pandora's box. And then they literally go into the next line of being like, oh yeah, making parallels to the myth of Pandora's box, which is like, okay, so that's interesting. Because he's basically saying how she could be dangerous, which I'm assuming the whole thing is that's not actually his niece. She's meant to be like a test subject that was kept far away. They probably kept up the pretense of like her parents found her, but really she's not their biological child. That's not really her uncle. She's a creature that they found that they've been secretly studying and trying to give her a human life because they're trying to keep her hidden, I guess it's the point. Like, whatever Osborn's up to, it might not be something that's public. Well, it's enough knowledge that even Ellison knows the truth. How many of the other professors know, we don't know, but her parents probably know the truth. I'm assuming, that's the truth that this is all about, but maybe that's the whole thing, because once again, making the parallels to Pandora's box, the whole thing of like, oh yeah, Pandora opened this box and let out a whole bunch of, like, all the evil in the world essentially came from Pandora's box. That's the whole thing. So they're making parallels to that. So it's like these creatures are connected to her. Like, did she bring them into this world? But obviously, well, the whole question then becomes too, like, did they implant her with fake memories when she was born? Was she actually born the way she is, or did she grow up like a normal human? Like, I mean, did she age from a child to what she is? Did she even age at all? Does she have fake memories of growing up? Like, that's the big question. I mean, she's actually suffering a form of PTSD because, like, when she was in her world, like the class that talks about like human history, they were kind of running a simulation of kind of World War One, and it gave her kind of a panic attack because she was thinking about like what happened, the colony getting attacked and everything. So very interested to see where all this takes us. Like I said, this was a lot of like setup, but there's still like a lot of world building. I'd like to kind of see where it all kind of takes us and find out like what is so special about her. Because even Xander was like, oh no, you made the portal pop up, which didn't seem like Jax really caught that. But it seems like it's almost like she created a bridge between like, it created like a wormhole between regular space-time and just someplace else. What exactly that place entails, we don't know. They weren't in there long enough to really know what it's all about. But I'm very interested to ultimately see, like I said, where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The 100. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. There's a whole situation of Abby and Raven coming back to be immediately arrested by Sanctum. It's actually kind of interesting because even Simone tries to do the honorable thing to be like, hey, actually, your daughter's dead. And Abby's like, wait, what the hell are you talking about? Which is interesting. And Russell has to immediately like, actually, what you told them was actually a lie because technically Clark is still alive because the whole transfer thing didn't go out the way we thought it would. And it's so interesting to kind of see the back and forth between this family, because obviously Simone kind of starts stepping on some like Josephine level stuff of like, oh, I guess we're just gonna have to kill them all. And it's like Russell's like, no, because if we do that, they'll make us just like them. It's like, fine, we're gonna need to at least kill one of them because that's the only way we can make up for this. Like, essentially there has to be punishment and ramifications for this particular situation. So, which, because Russell isn't all about that, because for one, he's obviously taking in a lot of blame because it's like, hey, I'm the one that made the decision to let these people from, Earth stay and whatnot, so it's kind of on me and whatnot. So there's all that happening. Riker is telling a few people of the truth about, we primes aren't actually gods, and your children that were sacrificed, they're not with the gods, they're not with the primes, they're going forever, essentially. So that's a hard truth to kind of have to swallow. And obviously there's a whole conversation between Gaia and Echo about how they're going to save everyone. And it's so interesting, the conversation with Riker, because Echo is like, oh, the only reason why you're helping us, Riker, because you want to, like, make things end peacefully, it's most likely not going to go down that way. Because the whole point is to tell enough people so that the people of Sanctum revolt against and rise up against the Sanctum. But there's also potentially a plan B. Her plan B is to basically kill Russell. I guess she feels like if she takes out one of the primes, that'll distract people enough so they can save someone. But also, like, without him at the tip of the spear, then the whole thing potentially might fall apart. Maybe it kind of reveals them to be the non-gods that they are. Not really 100% sure what Echo's plan was beyond killing Russell. Nevertheless, but, Echo points out the fact is, oh, Riker, you're only working with us because because I'm threatening to expose the truth that you are the one that let Gabriel go all that time ago. So it's not like he has the most pure of reasons why he's helping. But even he kind of has his issues with everything. But once again, it's the whole complicated thing of, yeah, you have issues with it, but you still partake in this system of body snatching. So there's that. Then there's a whole conversation about Murphy. So many interesting things going down where you have Maddie being like, oh, calling him a traitor and whatnot. And you have Nate being like, yeah, she had that same look in her face when she stabbed Jordan, which we don't see where Jordan is right now. I'm sure he's just kind of being medically taken care of. But Abby's like, wait, what do you mean traitor? Yeah, tell her. It's like, and then the truth about Murphy comes out and Abby slaps him. And it's like, Amori tries to defend him by being like, he did the right thing when he found out that Clark was still alive. eventually. But the fact of the matter, that's always been Murphy's thing. He always kind of comes through in the end, even though he might fuck up along the way. And it's even something Raven's like, yeah, you super messed up this time. I get it. You're afraid of dying. We literally are. Hell, Abby's arc is literally about her being afraid of losing Kane and ended up losing him anyway. So, you know, I'm sure there's a part of her that, obviously it's like one thing, it's like, oh, you're sacrificing my daughter for yourself and your own sake. You're working with the person that killed my daughter, you know, because it's like if Abby had known, she would have never worked with them. Even, but then again, it's like, would she have if it meant saving Marcus? So there's a kind, you could see tidbits of hypocrisy, but you know, maybe that's why Abby got so pissed, because I mean, for one, it's a different circumstances because it's her daughter, you know. So besides the Kane situation of sacrificing someone they don't know to save the man that she loves, so you know, once again, it's kind of the double standard in the situation. But you have Raven being like, immortality isn't going to be your solution to kind of being afraid of going into hell. Morality will be. And Murphy's like, morality, really? Then Gaia's trying to talk to Maddie, but Maddie's so caught up with Shade that she isn't listening to anyone else. It's like, now it's kind of like, well, what do? We literally can't let Maddie, who in this condition, anywhere near her sleeping army, because that'd be an issue. And she's even telling, because Abby's like, you're not telling us we're going to end up, I'm not going to let you kill some kid, but it's like, what would you rather have? It's like, literally, Maddie like this is going to make you beg to have Blood Raina back. It's like, that speaks volumes in itself. So Abby really doesn't have much of a response to that. But then Raven kind of thinks about something interesting. It's like, how does Shade Hater there and block out all the other commanders, because they're still there, they're just being kind of blocked off. So it's like, we could potentially do that to Shade Hater, block him off, then delete him, so that's no longer an issue. It's actually kind of interesting, because how was he stopped ultimately? He was killed by one of his one of the flame bearers, and it's like, actually it was by the fourth one, because apparently Shade Hater had killed the other three. So that's interesting. I think this Maddie situation is going to go a lot further than we kind of think it might, because she might cause a little more havoc. It's almost interesting to see her full-blown, because obviously we saw kind of like the caring kid. We got to know her over the course of season 5, and now we see her kind of full-blown evil to a certain extent. It's kind of crazy, especially when everyone's being taken away to be executed. She's like, goodbye, you know, talking to Gaia and kind of smiling. It's like, that's scary as hell. Obviously, they, you know, the people think to look at, oh, she's a host and whatnot, but they don't realize the danger that she poses just because of what's inside of her head now, you know. So there's that whole complicated thing. But ultimately, when it was going to be said and done, like, Murphy was stepping up to be like, all right, morality, I'll be the one to get it executed, but because of circumstances, which I'll get to soon enough, Russell decided to execute everyone, because he was pissed because Simone ends up getting killed because one of the people Riker told, like, obviously he lost his son who was sacrificed to the Primes, and it upsets him, and breaks a piece of glass and cuts Simone's throat. So, and Russell's like, I'll do whatever it takes to get you back, literally about to execute and burn everyone. But then the whole thing, it's like, at the last minute, Murphy's like, yo, Abby can do the same thing that she did to Clark, the whole bone marrow transfer to kind of make her into a black blood, night blood. See, I'm doing it. I did it in the Outpost, calling them night bloods. In this, I'm messing around calling them black bloods. Nevertheless, that's a whole tangent in itself. But nevertheless, you know, can make them into night bloods, and Abby agrees. And it's like, yeah, everyone gets spared except for the dude that killed Simone. It's like they needed to make a sacrifice, had to make an example of him, because it's like, oh, how almost, you know, it's like, let's not forget the reason why he was put in that position is because he learned the truth of what your people do, that you sacrifice people and you let people worship you like gods when you're just regular people who just found a loophole around death, you know. So once again, it's just, but for him, it's like, this is his way of keeping the tranquility that is Saint, and kind of keep things running. It's been running like this for so long, so we can't let people know the truth, because the people will revolt, and then like everything we built will kind of be burnt down. Like, he's still holding on to the dream of what Saint can represent and what it could be, you know. So that in itself is a very, very fascinating situation. So obviously they're also on a time crunch to make this situation possible, so that Simone can immediately, obviously, you know, saved. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens on that front, because it's also about, you know, trying to get the, you know, whose journal was it? They're trying to get Gaia's trying to get a journal so she can find a way to Oh yeah, Becca's journal. I was trying to remember whose journal it was. They're trying to look at Becca's journal to kind of find a way to kind of basically hack the flame so they could do that. So that's definitely going to be interesting on that front. Then there's also circling back to Clark's situation, which the whole her and Josephine thing kind of existed. Like, obviously it's all in her head, but Josephine being there and her and Clark interestingly talk. It's like the whole thing of like, oh yeah, like her and, Gabriel. It's like, obviously Gabriel doesn't necessarily want to kill her. It's just more so the fact of the matter is he doesn't want this whole immortality situation. It was a difference of opinion about it. Once again, it's the whole thing of like he just didn't want to come back anymore. It's kind of interesting because like Josephine embraced the whole coming back thing. Gabriel didn't. When he came back, because we see it in the memory, when she resurrected him, he's like, I didn't ask for this. She's like, yeah, but now we get our forever. So it was a beautiful, thing, but that's the whole thing about immortality. It kind of, you make the argument you coming back that many times can burn away a little bit of your soul each time to the point you become a different person. But Clark and Josephine's condition is so bad that it's like, okay, like their minds are literally starting to meld. Like the doorways between their minds is no longer there. Like her memories are starting to overlap into Clark's mind. So it's like, how do we do it? We basically delete a shit ton of your memories. I was like, oh, that's sad. I'm surprised the storyline didn't twist around and be like, oh, no. I'm deleting my memories. You got to choose some too. I was like, oh, that would suck if Clark did. But to be fair, in her case, she has plenty of memories to spare. Josephine does. She's been alive for like almost 2.5 centuries. She could spare a memory or two. But to the point that Clark was a little sentimental and didn't let her, like, she's like, okay, fine, you can keep this memory. But she ends up mass deleting a whole bunch of them. What those memories necessarily contain, we'll never know. But I assume it's some of the more side of things for Josephine. So, but it's interesting because her and Clark almost kind of bond a little bit because, like, Clark knows because she's like, yeah, I wasn't always like this. And Clark's like, no, I get it. Like, the fact of the matter is we've done things, but the fact of the matter is the things we've done don't have to define who we are. We make the choice of who we want to be. So it's kind of interesting because obviously there is the parallels between Clark and Josephine. And it's so interesting. Well, obviously, like, Josephine took advantage of the situation. She rises to the surface and she's in the body and she's letting her people know, it's like, hey, we're here. Arrest Gabriel because it's like, oh, we'll finally be together and like, she'll probably try. Most likely what's going to happen is like either he'll be locked up but at least you're alive and we can be together, or she's going to try and plead to her dad. It's like, just give him another chance. I'm curious, like, how would that, because no one else would sit well with the whole thought because of Gabriel so much went down. I mean, to be fair, like a lot of the stuff that went down wasn't even Gabriel, it was more so his children that kind of took his words and did that because obviously he wasn't really all for the whole killing Primes. It was more so just kind of letting things run its course, let people live their lives without the, Primes coming and taking over someone else's body when their time came, when their time ran up in whatever body they were in. But I love the whole, like, bam, 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 like, it's like one of the guards is betraying them, and it ends up being Bellamy. And I love Josephine being like, of course it's you. It's so interesting because Octavia gets so excited. She hugs him and says, oh, Bellamy. And he kind of like halfway hugs her, but then later on she's like, Bellamy. And then like he kind of walks away from her. And you can see the look in her eyes like, yeah, I know. I got a lot to kind of make up for. But the fact of the matter is, I think, because the growing up that Octavia did last episode, facing a lot of her demons last episode, I think it's going to be the path forward. And, obviously it's going to be a very steep thing. She's got a lot of amending to do to a lot of relationships, but I think she can do it with, I think that speaks volumes in itself because look at Bellamy and Clark. No matter all the stuff that's happened between them, like stuff that Bellamy's done, stuff that Clark's done, the fact of the matter is he's still fighting tooth and nail to save her, and to the point he was even like, I do, and that's why I'm kind of like, oh, it's kind of heartbreaking because I always kind of felt like for the longest time I was like, I think that's all. I don't know if they ever got together in the books. Well, because I know Thelonious' son, Wales, he was alive. I don't know if he survived the entirety of the books, but I know he lived much longer in the books than he does in the show. Like, he dies in the first season. So I think him and Clark end up being... I think they have an on and off thing in the books, if I remember. Because I read little excerpts about, like, some of the differences between the books and the TV show. So I think that's one thing. So I don't know if Clark and Bellamy are a thing in the books or not. But nevertheless, there's the whole situation of like, him and Echo. Like, my thought was, like, for the longest time, I always thought, like, oh, Clark and Bellamy would end up together just because they had that transition of being enemies and then friends and then besties and then people who rely so heavily on each other. Like, when stuff goes down, they confide in each other the most, you know? And I always kind of felt like that was going to lead to something potentially down the road. Never did. Stuff in season 4 heavily made me think that, but now it's like Bellamy and Echo, which once again that whole situation could get complicated depending on things. But it might just be like a, hey, no, it's never anything romantic like that, but we're best friends tied by fate, you know, type of situation. So we'll see. But I just thought it was just kind of neat for him not wanting to give up on her, because obviously it's a situation of like the condition, like the whole point Gabriel was trying to do is if he can stop Clark's heart and remove the mind drive, basically by her dying, Josephine automatically gets backed up into the mind drive, and then when Clark gets resurrected, when they kind of restart her heart again, bam, she's Clark, and it kind of solves the issue. But the interesting and complicated thing is, like, obviously, you know, for Gabriel, he's reluctant to do it because Josephine's like, hey, we can grow old together, we can live our lives, we can finally have our forever and everything. But Gabriel's like, I've loved you for centuries, but the fact of the matter is, I think it's time for me to let you go, because he realizes, like, because obviously it's that complicated thing that Josephine had brought up before of, like, if, you know, he finds himself in a position to be like, oh, I have her mind drive, if I let her go back to her people, it's, you know, and if I can, in this particular case, allow this treaty of peace between the two groups, that means this whole situation is going to continue, because they're not going to for the sake of peace, they're not going to interfere with the way they operate. But it's like, still, it's like they'll be killing innocent people, and obviously that's something Marcus died to stop, because it's like, we can't let something like this go. We can't, like, an injustice. But then that's also a whole conversation that's kind of popped up in other TV shows like Legion, of like, who are you to come in and tell me what's wrong about the way we've operated, because they've operated this way for centuries. So it's like, this is a way of people's lives, but at the same time, it's like they deserve to know the truth, that they're sacrificing their children and family members just for the sake so other people don't die. You lose a person you care about just so and so, this person who pretends to be a god, to be worshipped as a god, can come back to life. So there's a whole complicated thing in itself. So, but Josephine isn't willing to let go, because she's like, oh, but Clark, like, the fact of the matter is, Sanctum is mine. I know that if you go back, you're just going to kill everyone. That's just in your nature, which is so interesting and so hypocritical, because once again, we've already recognized the parallels between you and Clark. The fact of the matter is, you were saying, you had the whole conversation, like, because she was even like, oh, I kind of wanted to give this whole friendship thing a try, but it's like, nah, I know who you are and what you would ultimately do. Doesn't mean Clark would do that. Clark is usually only about the whole, like, doing something like, you know, you're trying to make it seem like she's full-blown genocidal. It's like, no, she's not. Clark is always in a situation where she's forced to do what she believes is right. I mean, what Josephine's ever done has always been self-preservation. Like, that's the thing. If Gabriel had chosen that, she would have said, like, oh yeah, we'll grow old together. But eventually down the road, when she got close to death, she would do the whole mind drive thing again. She most likely forced you to, you know, kind of get a new body, just because they're that afraid of death. We saw how far Murphy was willing to go. We see how far the Primes are willing to go to keep this a secret, for obviously other reasons, but also so they have willing hosts. That, I mean, obviously that's kind of an issue now with the whole, like, not having any Nightbloods, but you get the whole point. But it's just interesting, and I just think it's hypocritical. But because Bellamy telling her not to give up, she ended up fighting back and destroying what was left of Josephine. That's the thing. That's what I'm trying to, like, understand. Was that just like a fraction of Josephine that she had hidden? That's what it kind of seemed like conversation-wise. I don't think that was full-blown Josephine being like, oh no, I stayed inside. Maybe it was. I don't know. I chalked that up to being kind of a thing of, like, that was a fraction of herself that she had hidden behind to stay there to kind of get rid of Clark. It's like, yeah, I'm on a mind drive, but hey, here Clark's dead. Oh, well, that's not my fault type of thing. But Clark didn't give up, and it's like, yes, it's kind of a good win. So everything's, you know, working out on that end. So Clark is alive. Obviously Bellamy sent the message back to be like, yo, Josephine's alive. If you want her to stay alive, if anything happens to my people, which that message hadn't gotten to them in time. Also, Riker had knocked Echo out. I hadn't even talked about that, because for him, it's like for his family's sake. I guess it's the whole thing of, like, because he wants, you know, to make, because if all the primes die, that would include his mom, but also maybe he has other family, maybe like his dad or siblings that he wants to come back. So for their sake, to give them an opportunity to come back, he needs to stop Echo from doing what she's doing before she collapses everything. So, which is so interesting because he was all for it, but then it's just kind of like, no, my family comes first. So it's definitely going to be very interesting to see where all of this ultimately takes us going forward into the next episode. Other things that need to be considered. What about Dioza and Anomaly thing? Still haven't circled back around to what that's going to be about. What about Gabriel? Like, with things kind of playing out this way, like, what's he going to do? Is he going to destroy the mind drive that has Josephine on it? Once again, that comes down to, like I said, I believe that's a fraction of her that was on there, but I get the feeling like I might be wrong and that might have been all her and there was none of her left on the mind drive. Whatever the case may be. It's going to be interesting to see where Gabriel goes forward with his philosophy on just kind of, even his final lines to her was death is life, because by being able to die, you're able to just fully live your life and just kind of appreciate it, because if you're able to live forever, life just becomes so easily, like, once again, we saw with Josephine, it's like, oh, these people can get, like, Kaylee can be resurrected, so ended up killing her just to get revenge. So it shows, like, how, once again, how little they look at life, just because, oh, we'll get resurrected, oh, another person will come by, whatever the case may be. So it kind of shows you just how they look at life, but by being able to die, it kind of makes you appreciate life, appreciate the time you got, because eventually you live forever. A lot of that feeling, that emotion, that piece of your soul kind of burns away. So no, that's just, like I said, my brain, how I'm seeing it and thinking about it. Nevertheless, really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.